Welcome to the Edinburgh Fringe. Today, we go back to the dawn of the internet before bringing it right up to date with Grace Helbig. Yes, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. This is Edinburgh calling, and very, very soon it will be the home of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, turning Scotland's capital city into the arts capital of the world. In terms of timetabling, next week will be the press previews. This, I would guess, is your public preview as we bring in another performer who will be taking to the stage at the Fringe and talking in depth about their show and about the fabric that surrounds it. And in this episode, it's essentially the fabric of the internet, the content creator, which is, curious enough, where this podcast started long, long ago back in 2005. I'll be talking to Grace Helbig and her show Let Me Get This Off My Chest. And we start talking about those early days of content creation, both for myself and her, starting off in the first flush of YouTube back in 2005, 2006. And that kind of starts us down a path talking about online personae, presenting yourself, the content grind, and how that was all disrupted by Grace's diagnosis of breast cancer. The show, Let Me Get This Off My Chest, you can spot the double meaning now, is at 7 p.m. right through until August the 24th at the Pleasance Dome. So let's find a little bit more about it and Grace now. And that journey from, before that point, during that point, and after that point, and why Grace decided to put it into the public eye. Grace Helbig joins me now. Welcome to the show, Grace.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And just before we got onto the let's talk about the Fringe Show and everything, we've got battle wounds from the early days of the web, haven't we?
Yes. Wow. It is so lovely to be in company with someone that was so like a moth to a flame, connected to tech in the early days.
So for those of you out there who remember history, this podcast started in 2005.
Wow.
YouTube spun out of, they did an actual service. Yeah, it was Twitch that spun out of Justin TV. See, we're in the trenches now, because Grace, you started not long after me, didn't you?
And I haven't heard about Justin TV for a long time.
It's Twitch. That's Twitch TV. That's all it is.
I know. YouTube started in 2006. I remember I was in college, or I guess uni, as you all say, and I uploaded my first YouTube videos in an editing class that I had taken on my college campus, and then it just sort of spiraled. So it's so nice to be in company with an early interneter like yourself.
I'm saying early internet. I can remember being online in like 98. So I'm just old
Wow.
Grandpa Simpson here going, "Rrr."
Wow, you were in those AOL chat rooms?
Oh no, it wasn't AOL actually. Over here, you did have AOL here in the UK, but we used Demon Internet.
Demon Internet?
Yeah.
So they were already villainizing it.
They villainized themselves.
Yeah.
They just went, you know what? Let's skip to the end. We're Demon Internet.
Yeah, we're going to be a problem.
They weren't actually so many. Demon Internet, CompuServe and Kicks, all that. Right, okay, We're not having history. Well, we are kind of having a history lesson with your show at the Fringe, because it does go back into your history, and it does go back to those early YouTube days.
Yes.
Let me get that off my chest. Let's start with those sort of early days and why that is the foundation of you coming to the Fringe.
Yeah, the show on its surface is about my unexpected breast cancer diagnosis in 2023. However, that's sort of an entry point to be able to talk about a deeper idea around identity and the way that we present ourselves, especially online. I've been technically a professional content creator for 17 years now. Yeah, I was a professional YouTuber long before the word influencer even Rochambeaued its way into our English language. I was really very burnt out after years and years of content creation. I had kind of, in those early days of being a content creator, we all sort of were drawn to this incredibly open, democratized platform where anyone could be a creator if they had passion and access to a camera. And that was so alluring, and it attracted this kind of like ilk of misfits in a way. And I was also doing comedy in New York at the time and trying to go the traditional route of entertainment. And that was obviously very overwhelming, very intimidating, very much gate kept by the gatekeepers. And the internet didn't have gatekeepers. So of course I would put my attention in that direction. And so I ended up developing this personal brand almost by accident in those early days when the industry itself was still sort of creating itself. Like we were creating in real time as this industry was kind of like constructing itself around us. And it was an absolutely incredible time that I am privileged to have experienced. But there was also, with the novelty of everything, there was no guidebook on how to protect yourself psychologically from the impact of putting yourself out there online as yourself over and over and over again. And so I went through a huge phase of burnout in probably 2017 into 22. And so I finally took a step back from content creation and did the thing I think every 30-something in crisis does. I got into graduate school. I was like, I'll go back to school. That'll fix me. And I was really, really kind of in this crossroads of not knowing who I was in the world. I had created this like version of myself that existed online that still felt very true to myself, but not entirely. And I realized I had gone back to school to study depth psychology, C.G. Jung, and sort of the unconscious mind and psychic wholeness. I've always been very interested in psychology. And I really learned a lot about the idea of persona and the way that we present these like front-facing masks that are pleasing to the public, and realized in retrospect that I had crystallized this persona as part of my brand that still felt very authentic to me, but it wasn't entirely me. And I didn't know who I was if I wasn't making content online. And so it was a bit of an identity crisis because the internet forces you to like really understand who you are and market it as best as you can so people know what they're getting into. And then you do it again and 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 again until you can't do it anymore. And so I was at this huge crossroads in my late 30s, and I was graduating from graduate school, still unsure about exactly what to do with myself. And then divine intervention, I got breast cancer. And that gave me something to do with myself and a new identity in the world. I got to be a woman on a healing journey, and that's where the show comes in. It sort of follows the lessons and the confessions that have come up from my experience going through breast cancer treatment that really shook me out of myself in a way that I would not have been able to do otherwise, but I think I was sort of searching for in a way of going back to graduate school, of just like trying to figure out who I was independent of the internet, which had become so embedded in my life and so embedded in my sense of self and self-worth. And yeah, all it took was a little bout with breast cancer to really shake it up. and I actually ended up vlogging, documenting kind of my experience going through treatment. And so it was the first time that I had presented myself online, not as a comedian, not doing bits, not looking for punchlines, not looking for jokes. I was just presenting the truth of my experience. And it felt bizarre almost to be so real and to not be like performing in some capacity. It felt easy in a different way than I had ever made content before. And it really kind of, I think, brought out a different side of authenticity that I hadn't experienced in myself before, and was really, really impactful. And the important thing that kind of carried me through was comedy the whole time, like being able to find humor in the hardest moments helped me metabolize sort of the hard, big feelings around everything and process the experience in and of itself. So it was only kind of natural that a storytelling hour came out of the whole experience.
So we have the journey on the internet where,
Yeah.
I mean, I was there. There was no path. We were making it up and supporting each other along the way. And some people
supporting each other along the way. Yes.
And you've already been quite flip, so I can now mirror on your cancer journey. And then that journey personally, and then the journey to do the hour. It's quite a well-worn path.
It really just changed a lot of the way in which I saw content creation and I saw myself online. I was having a lot of trouble, after a decade of shooting videos of myself and editing videos of myself and posting videos of myself. I'm sure you've experienced this to some degree. You start to get really sick of yourself after a while. Sometimes you can be like, what am I doing? And I was having a huge moment of crisis about just not liking who I was or not knowing who I was, and not from that knowing like how to create from a real place that I felt proud of. And in kind of putting the breast cancer stuff out there, I realized like, sometimes you just being yourself and sharing what's going on is enough. You don't need to make bits out of everything, even though, like I said, the comedy helped me through. So it really sort of had shaken up the pressure that I felt too after all those years of like my job is content creation, which comes down to like being myself in some capacity. And if I don't feel like I'm being myself, I can't do my job. And then my whole world sort of like suffers by proxy. And then breast cancer comes in and goes, actually, there's bigger problems, bitch. and kind of puts things in a perspective that is really hard to learn from reading a book or watching a YouTube video. I'm sure we've talked a little bit about like some medical things that you've gone through, and it really does it gives you this profound perspective that is hard to put into words sometimes.
Yeah. And then, I mean, the one that got me was the older generations in my family, like, why are you telling everybody? And it was a similar story with my wife's cancer diagnosis. And the younger generation is like, oh yeah, of course you're going to share. And there's this strange sort of, like a tipping point. I always feel that I'm a generation ahead of you. And it's just like, we were the generation that had no internet and every internet, and having to navigate that one. And we were being authentic, and that's one of the other things. I want to follow up on that one there.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you started out on YouTube, you were being as much of yourself as you could because there wasn't a guide. And you said there that going on your cancer journey allowed you to be yourself again. It's like almost a symmetry there of getting a clean slate, but putting far more out there than you would after a couple of years of experience.
Yeah, it's really interesting to put it in that perspective. I remember when I first started making videos, comedy was always I didn't necessarily have a personal philosophy or ethos around creating. However, there was an undercurrent of protection of privacy. Like, I was a comedian, so it was always going to be about the comedy first. And then if there's things about my personal life, that'll be secondary or tertiary in some capacity. I don't want to put everything out on the internet because it is dangerous in a lot of ways and you can't get it back. And so there is a preciousness to your privacy, and especially now, that I think we all need to be very conscious of how much we share and the intentions of why we're sharing. And I was getting really overwhelmed in the space of just seeing it grow in different ways and seeing creators that I had known for years suffer in different capacities with their content creation, with their business, because it affected them psychologically. Like different than, Fringe is shows on a stage that have a backstage that when the performers go back there, it's a private space away from the audience. The internet there's no backstage. So you can be performing constantly. And unless you put in these boundaries for yourself on a personal level of how much you expose of yourself online or share, how much you work in the internet space, because you could work 24 hours a day if you want. And I know a lot of creators that do that in the beginning because it's such an intoxicating environment to work in. And so I had felt like I was losing myself because I just kept tripling down on this like performative aspect of it. And also, it's interesting, the beginning years cultivated this audience. I was in my early 20s. So my sense of self when I was creating YouTube videos from the start was hardly formed. I formed in reflection to making content. Like my sense of self developed as I did more of this Daily Grace series that I created in the beginning. Like I found myself and my voice through experimenting with content creation and creating, thousands and thousands of little vlogs that are just me in my apartment coming up with bits and riffing and trying to make a mysterious audience member laugh. But over time, I sort of got burnt out on that, and the idea, like the authentic side of me started to chip away. And like you said, the breast cancer thing was so real. It's like so real that even when you try to present it in a funny way, it's just like it is breast cancer at the end of the day. And there was this compelling sort of, well, I got diagnosed and then there was like one of two avenues I could go down. I could share it with an audience, or I could keep it to myself and keep it offline and keep it private. And it felt like more work to try and keep it private than to just sort of tell people what was going on. And in starting to tell people what was going on, the feedback immediately was so much different than any other content I'd ever put out there, for obvious reasons. But it created this sort of like feedback cycle of people, audience members, people that have experienced the exact same thing or had family members go through some sort of cancer that were giving me pieces of information about what to expect, what I should stock up on, things that I probably wouldn't have figured out on my own necessarily. And then the videos became these hubs where all the comments are just like helpful contributions of thoughts and ideas from people that have been through it. So now they exist as these sort of like archives that people can go back to that are going through this experience or know someone that's going through it that can point to like, here's some helpful information. So it became like, I felt very purpose driven in making content in a way that I hadn't felt for years. And yeah, it just sort of all came out online. And in hindsight, perhaps I should have had some discernment on keeping some of it offline, because my husband now is like, you really put it all out there during your treatment. Because in my mind, I was like, I look great. I'm doing fine. And now I look back on those videos and I'm like, yikes. Whoa. Okay. She looks like she's going through treatment and she's making the best of it. But I'm still like very proud of being able to share that with people. It's had a really incredible effect on me personally. And I think is helpful to sort of destigmatize the idea of what we think breast cancer or cancer looks like for everyone, because it is so dramatically different for everyone as well.
When did you decide this was going to go on stage then?
Oh, even when I was in the middle of treatment, I have been for years. I started out doing improv comedy and sketch comedy, and then the internet just sort of exploded. So that stole my focus. So I have, since I started in comedy, been desiring to do a one-woman show or an hour of something. I just never had an idea or a story that I felt so driven by to develop into something. And as soon as this happened, I was really intensely journaling kind of everything that was going on. I was vlogging, and last summer I just sat down and it sort of just came together in like a few days, the whole story of it. And being able to tie in what I have gone through in terms of being a long-term content creator it just feels like, oh, this is the moment I've been waiting for, to put all of this together And maybe, I'm not very much a religious or spiritual person, but perhaps this has all been waiting for this moment to come together like this in the way it has. It has just felt very organic in how it's happened. So yeah, I was writing jokes pretty much the whole time I was going through treatment.
A lot of people who bring theatre to the Fringe, to debut pieces at the Fringe, have a view of, going it out on tour, taking it around a Fringe circuit, using that to do more theatre, to do more work. Pete, you're on a different career genre for, I'll just make career genre up. That's a good one.
Love it.
So is this piece a culmination piece, or is this the start of another volume piece?
I don't know exactly. I know that I love this show and I'd like to take it wherever anyone will let me do it and say it. I've been taking around the States a little bit in prep for Fringe mostly. And the hope is to be able to continue to perform around the States and internationally. I mostly just want to get to Philadelphia because that's where my family lives, and I'd love for them to see this show finally. They have not seen it yet, and they are part of the stories in here. And so that's really kind of my personal goal. If any other opportunities happen on top of that, incredible. I also think I'm very introverted, which is why, like a moth to the flame, I freaking love the internet so much. But I do think that gathering in spaces right now, collective communal spaces that are full of passion and joy and art, are really, really important. And so it feels, I don't know, like a really excellent time to be able to get up in front of people in the same space and just sort of share stories with each other.
You do know Philadelphia's on the way to Edinburgh, don't you?
I know.
You could have stopped off on the way.
I know. Well, the goal is to have dates happen in the fall. I'm still getting that all figured out for the States, fall into next year. I had to kind of, the show has sort of evolved in the few times that I've been doing it around the States so far. So I want to, get it to my parents when I know it's in tip-top shape.
How much of the grace that your parents see am I speaking to just now? How much are you holding back in this interview?
Oh, honestly, I think I'm pretty genuine. And maybe crazy people say that. But I have had a real fascination with authenticity and that buzzword. I hate even saying that word now because I think we've gone away from what it actually means, because with the heavily documentation of our society with cell phones, like we all are performing constantly. So we all are putting on a bit of a mask sometimes. But I do think, and I think that's what, when I first started making content, I thought I had to be the performative version of myself all the time. And then the breast cancer thing was like, actually, no, you as yourself, as an actual human being is compelling because guess what? There's human beings watching you. And I'm obsessed with reality TV for a lot of reasons, but on a psychological level, I find the way that people experience the world and themselves ultimately so fascinating. And so I feel like I've been on this like quest for authenticity for years now. And I'm always very acutely aware or fascinated by the way that people present themselves. And so I do think I'm just being me because it's exhausting to not. And I've learned that. I think the burnout that I had was years and years and years of compounded like masking without consciously realizing it in a way.
So how thin is that veil then on stage?
Oh, I think the veil is, I think it goes back and forth. There's almost maybe perhaps a whiplash to the show itself because I'm talking about some serious stuff, but then I want it to be funny because the experience in the cancer treatment of it all is such whiplash. There's like intense, serious things that come up unexpectedly, but then it's they're so absurd and obscene sometimes that they're hilarious. So you can kind of go back and forth between this like heaviness and this levity, and that's sort of what the show, and this sincerity and this sarcasm. And I think that's what I'm balancing in the show is I think I'm a comedian that likes to perform with my heart, and I have really found the value in that more and more in the last few years without being overly saccharine sweet or obnoxiously earnest. I think that there is a beautiful balance between presenting the seriousness of a situation with also the silliness of how insane it is.
And for those people who want to come to the show, when's it on?
I am at the Pleasance Jack Dome in Edinburgh, and which you have to tell me how to say Edinburgh correctly, because I have been told
Borough.
I'm Borough.
Edinburgh. Burra, if you were to imagine it. There's a bit at the end.
Borough.
Yeah. It's like a hill constantly going up. And
okay.
And when you get to Edinburgh, you realise it's a hill going constantly up is all that Edinburgh is. Everything's on a hill. Everything is uphill.
Oh, great. Okay,
Even
great.
when you're coming home at the end of the day, it's still uphill. I don't know how it works either. It just is.
I can't wait. My calves will be monstrous by the end of this. Fantastic.
Right, where can people find out more about you online?
I'm mostly on Instagram these days, but at Grace Helbig across all social media platforms. Check it out.
And we'll have the other important link, which is to the box office back at our website, which is edinburghfringe.thepodcastcorner.com. Grace, thanks very much.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Grace Helbig there talking about her show Let Me Get This Off My Chest. Pleasance Dome, 7 p.m. right through until August the 24th. There's always links, as mentioned there in the interview, to the box office for the show and all the shows we mentioned back at our website, edinburghfringe.thepodcastcorner.com. We'll have links to Grace's Instagram there as well. So that was our second or third preview, depending how you count our prologue. We will have another one next week, which will be near the end of the press previews, and then after that we will be into our daily shows going forward, bring you as much as we can from the Fringe. There's so many shows we can't bring them all, so it's just a tiny little window, but even a tiny little window is a month and more of the Fringe here in the podcast. Thanks very much for listening. As always, you can find out more back at our website. Link, like, love, share, subscribe, all the usual social media requests. Go in here and I'll catch you in the next podcast. But for now, ta-ra. Been listening to the Edinburgh Fringe Show, hosted by Ewan Spence, produced by the Podcast Corner for Spence Media and Radio 6 International. Listen to more from the Fringe at edinburghfringe.thepodcastcorner.com.